All right, so I'm using a shot glass and a random thing I found in the house to prop up the phones because we don't have a high budget here, but I've been wanting to make this video for a while now, and it's the fact that I switched over to Samsung after using the iPhone for a decade, starting with the iPhone 5S. That's a long time. So my SIM card has been in the S23 Ultra for a little over 2 months now, and you know who helped me make this video possible for the past 2 months? Our sponsor, nobody. It was just hard work and labor for the past 2 months. So I'm going to cut this video into two parts. This video is going to be more of the main things that people care about, and then I'll have a deep dive video because, trust me, 2 months is a lot of time, and I discovered a lot of details between iOS and Android. Now, if you want to know my biggest issue, go here or somewhere on the screen. Otherwise, continue watching for the main points. So at the beginning of March, I put my SIM card in the S23 Ultra before I went on my trip and left my main iPhone at home. And this would force me to figure out and adjust to Samsung no matter what. And I know some reviewers, whenever they swap phones, they typically have two phones on them at once and have their main SIM on the phone that they swap to. But we don't run two phones at the same time on this channel. We're cheap, and that's also cheating as well. So let's jump right into it. On one of the first issues I ran into when I switched over to the S23 Ultra, it's not messages and it's not AirDrop, although those are important. It's this guy right here. It's by far one of the most underrated features on the iPhone. And I know some companies like OnePlus have a volume rocker, but I went with the Ultra because this is a flagship and a direct competitor to Apple worldwide. But being able to just switch off the volume immediately is so easy and consistent. Whereas on the S23 Ultra, by the way, I'm just gonna call it Ultra from now on, but the Ultra, you have to swipe down, tap a few times to get to the setting that you want, and it just adds in more extra layers of steps when you need to just shut off your phone or turn your ringer back on in an immediate fashion. I know it's a pretty small thing, but using an iPhone for 10 years and then trying to get that same functionality over on Android took a little bit of learning for the first couple of weeks. All right, so I've broken the ice with the mute switch because who likes icebreakers? Not me. Let's talk about the user interface between the two because there's been some talks that Android is more complicated to use than iOS, but in my experience, I would say that they're almost identical, and I would go as far to say that it's actually more simple on Android. Here's why. We have most of our important stuff on the home screen. We might have different pages for different categories or folders to categorize certain apps, or a special screen dedicated to some widgets. But if you're like me with a ton of apps, at some point you just have the main screen and search for the apps you need. Where Android starts to flex its muscles, it's when it comes to customization. And I know some people are going to roll their eyes and say, here, this guy goes again, talking about customization on Android. But I do want to give credit to Apple because they've recently revamped their lock screen and added in widgets themselves. But on the Ultra, having the ability to set multiple videos or a video on your lock screen just gives you more life and personalization when it comes to your phone. For example, like this, right? It just gives me a more personalized taste on some of the memories I've had versus on iOS where it's just some pictures that I can tap through or changes every time that I click on it or unlock the screen. Then we move over to the home screen. Once again, I could customize my Ultra to be like the iPhone, but you can do much more on Android. And I actually find that my home screen is more simple and clean than on the iPhone because everything is forced to be next to each other on iOS. And having just the icons I need and spacing them out in the way that I want gives me more space and less clutter than iOS has. But let me pause here because I know some people are going to type, actually on iPhone, you can do the same thing. You just have to add this or that, have this invisible icon here, or do this with a special app. Yes, you can do this on iOS. There are workarounds, but that's too much effort when I can just natively do it on Android by simply dragging and dropping. Or I can just have a home screen with no icons. Simple as that. Android is simple. I never thought I'd use those two words in the same sentence. Now, I know I'm talking about the user interface for a little long here, but trust me, it's what most of us interact with, and I'm gonna wrap it up here. So there are widgets on Android. Are they clean as iOS? No, but you have way more options, and I would want function over how pretty my widgets look on my screen. I do find that the iOS widgets are good, but in terms of the choices we have, it's pretty limited. But on Android, we have plenty of apps that utilize some type of widget and gives my home screen more usability. Now let's talk about the biggest issue that a lot of iPhone people care about, and that would be moving away from iMessage. Now, my friend demographic is about 65% iPhone, 35% Android, and the Android people were either happy or didn't care, and the iPhone people were disappointed or didn't care. To the people that didn't care, thank you. For some people, it is a really big issue moving away from iMessage and texting people to iPhone if you have an Android, but for me, it wasn't an issue at all. Mainly because when I open up messages, I type in a message and hit send. I wait for the person to respond, and then we have a certified conversation on our hands. How crazy that messages just work on both phones. It's not like the internet was invented to send messages or anything. I think what most people want to know is, how do I feel about not having the blue bubbles? It does suck, especially when you've been using it for the past 10 years, but a handful of my friends and people I talk to are on WhatsApp or other third-party apps dedicated to messaging, so I retain most of my functionality over there. I was still able to text from my computer thanks to Google Messages, and the beauty of that is that I can use it on either macOS or Windows. Now, group messages are still a bit weird, and I pretty much gave up on it. My sisters and I have a group chat, and my messages go to another group chat and not the main one, and it's this weird thing where even I don't really understand what's going on. So just know, if you move from iPhone to Android, group messages are going to act weird if they were originally created on iPhone. Just putting that out there. Now, I could segue into AirDrop. I don't know why I'm doing movements, but I'll save AirDrop for the ecosystem section. It's just that iMessage needed its own dedicated point. So this next section is also important to most people, and that would be the cameras. Now, the iPhone, once again, I'm coming from an iPhone 13 Pro, has 3 lenses. So this is something common you're gonna see on Apple's higher end phones. Whereas on the Ultra, we have a nice 4 cameras. Now, the 3 cameras are pretty much identical. You have your ultra wide, your 1X, and then a 3X, right? Is it 3X? Let me double check. Or is it 2X? It's 3X. I can fact check myself. Where the Ultra starts to flex its muscles a little bit is when it comes to this 10X lens. And I thought to myself, when would I ever use a 10X lens when 3X has been enough for me on the iPhone? And I use the 10X lens more times than I could count, which is a pretty low number. But the thing that sold me for the Ultra camera was this specific moment on my trip. iPhone recently, and when I say recently, it's just like the 12 Pro, 13 Pro, 14 Pro, have some focusing issues and sometimes, and I don't know why. I thought iPhones had great autofocusing and auto balancing, but when I went over to the S23 Ultra, it blew me away. So that's not good. So when trying to see Mount Everest, one side of the plane can see, and then the plane goes in the other direction so the other passengers can see. The iPhone was struggling to punch through the window and was just going crazy at times, but when I did it on the Ultra, zooming in using that 10X lens, it had no issues at all, and I could still see the mountain despite being on the other side of the plane. Now, I'm not saying that the iPhone camera is worse. It's not. I actually still prefer it because videos I wouldn't say are bad, but coming from an iPhone, it's definitely a downgrade. Occasionally there's hitching when switching lenses, and the white balance changes are much more dramatic, which can ruin a whole video depending on what you're going for. And then darker folks like myself, the camera really doesn't know what to do half the time, so doesn't really matter whether it's on iPhone or Android, we're just stuck with this. But if you just have a steady shot with decent lighting, the videos are pretty close. These phones are top of their class when it comes to photos and videos, and they trade blows in certain categories, and overall are very high quality smartphone cameras. I wasn't disappointed at all when I went to the Ultra. Next up is ecosystem. I really wanted to talk about this section. Now, this might shock you, but I think the ultimate combo is a Samsung phone paired with a MacBook. Now, is it better with an iPhone? Seriously? Okay, I take back what I said, but I didn't feel like my MacBook was any less capable than what I had before. Sure, I couldn't AirDrop anymore, but I do have a Samsung Book, which is basically a MacBook when it comes to the entire ecosystem paired with a Samsung device. Sure, the laptop is overall louder and hotter, and at times the battery doesn't last as long as a MacBook, but it performs for what I need it to do, and what else could you ask for in a laptop? Plus, it's a two-in-one, so that makes it even more versatile than a MacBook, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about the buds. Now, in terms of, I gotta switch these. In terms of connectivity between switching devices, it's basically flawless on both ecosystems. The sound quality, I wouldn't say is necessarily better on the Buds Pro, but it's more of my preference when it comes to listening to music because it's more lighter on the higher ends. The app is more well thought out when it comes to using the Buds Pro 2 versus just the Bluetooth settings that you have on iPhone. But the one thing I will give credit to Apple is the noise cancellation. Apple does it better, and the transparency mode is about the same, but I would also give the slight edge to the iPhone as well. But at the end of the day, guys, it's a case that holds earbuds and charges wirelessly with different ports. It's a matter of preference. But being detached from the Apple ecosystem wasn't really that hard. I just stopped wearing my Apple Watch because I started wearing regular watches anyway. I can mirror my phone to my TV, but if I had a Samsung TV, it would be much smoother. Apple TV and Airplane is, I would say, a better experience overall. I did miss AirDrop, I'm not gonna lie. Being able to just drop gigabytes of data between devices wirelessly is amazing, not to mention AirPlay as well when it comes to compatible speakers. However, when I got my Samsung Book, AirDrop really became useless. And when it came to speakers, I mean, most speakers these days can be connected through Bluetooth. Obviously, AirPlay is much nicer, but Bluetooth offers more or less the same functionality as well. The Samsung ecosystem is also wider with their TVs, like I stated before, but they also have home appliances, their watches, tablets, monitors, laptops, and Samsung is a very successful consumer brand, just like Apple. They just have more stuff. A lot more stuff. Now let's talk about what Apple is famous for and its battery life despite their smaller battery size. Now, I would say it's not truly a fair comparison because I don't use Pro Max devices because they are notorious for having the best battery life out of any phone. But switching over to the Ultra did not disappoint me at all because I am perfectly happy with the battery life that I had with my regular Pro. So I was afraid during my trip and even in my day-to-day that I would have to charge at least once. Nope, not at all. I had 120 hertz all the time, max resolution, and I was using my phone for large amounts of the day outside, and I still had juice left over. Now, I do want to mention that I think this is mainly because I didn't have 5G or LTE when I switched over my SIM card, and I don't think people realize how much cellular data actually drains your battery. But even when I came back to the States, this phone was just a beast when it came to battery life. I could use it for an entire day and a half until I needed to charge. The fast charging is about the same. In about 45 minutes, you'll get to 80% on both devices, but I do like how on the Ultra, it tells you how long it's gonna take till you charge and what type of charging you're doing. There's like regular charging, fast charging, then like super fast charging. Same with the wireless as well, something Apple should take note of. The reason why I'm stressing this, it's because I know people who have iPhones for a couple months and their capacity is sitting at anywhere between the mid 90s or even low 90s in extreme cases. The crazy thing is, when it comes to this battery life, I didn't even charge it to 100% ever, other than like when I first unboxed it and used it. But Samsung has this setting where you can cap the battery out at 85%, no matter what. And you can disable fast charging to further protect your battery health, but I like my fast charging. The iPhone has this optimized battery charging, which is intelligently supposed to do the same thing and should know when your phone should be at 80% based on your routine. And they've had it for a couple of years now, and almost every time I pick up my phone, despite my routine, it charges to 100%. No idea why. It's almost as intelligent as Siri. But once again, for battery life, not really fair because I didn't come from a Max, but no problems at all with the Ultra battery. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I was able to get out of one battery use. I feel like this phone is backed up gradually as the video has gone on. But let's talk about the screens now, because this one is tough. But it's better on the Ultra, no questions asked. At first, I hated the big phone, but I got used to it. But I don't really care about size. That's not what I want to talk about. It's the screen itself. The Ultra's colors are more vibrant, more vivid. The fluidity of the animations, I would say, is better on the Ultra. The screen gets much darker, so it's better on your eyes at night, but it also gets much brighter as well. I still have the 120 Hertz refresh rate, also known as ProMotion for the iOS people, but you also have the customization of the always-on display. The taller display also helps with the better reading, or I should say, you can read more with a taller screen. I know Apple goes with the approach of having it be wider on the Max devices, but it's a fantastic screen and it's one of the best features of using the Ultra. And I've got to say, going back to my iPhone, it just doesn't have that same pop as the Ultra. You know what I realized I forgot to mention? FaceTime. Didn't miss it at all. That's probably why I forgot to mention it. There are tools I already use like WhatsApp. Android recommends Google Meet. I use it like once and I was like, just hit me up on WhatsApp or Discord. And the beauty of this is that nobody could tell what device I was on because those apps work across both devices. Speaking of apps, let's talk about apps before I wrap things up. So over the years, I've heard that apps on Android suck compared to iPhone. But here's how I'm gonna break it down. You have your primary tier apps that most of the world uses. These could be your banking apps, your social media apps, your travel apps like airlines, and some of the top games. These apps, in terms of design and function, are nearly identical, if not the same, on both platforms. These are the apps that I truly care about, and I'm sure you truly care about as well. Then you have your second tier apps, which is kind of middle in the pack. A lot of people still use these apps, but the popularity isn't on the same magnitude as the primary tier apps. Here, most of the apps are the same, but one phone might do it better than the other. Then you have everything else, which is like your mileage is going to vary on either device. You can live without them. Most of my apps exist in that primary and secondary tier, and I didn't have any issues using them on Android whatsoever. Now, if you skipped to this part of this video, you missed out on some great points, but you should subscribe because you clicked on the video in the first place. Give me something at least. But the biggest issue is not iMessage, it's not AirDrop, it's not even the ecosystem or the lack of how amazing Siri can be, but it's voicemail. Anticlimactic, I know, but I didn't realize how much of a luxury voicemail was on iPhone. Am I crazy for this one? And I know some people might be like, who cares about voicemail? I do. If you're independent, and I don't want to say a certain age because people can be independent at a very early age, but when you are on your own, paying bills, signing up for your own services, and managing your life, phone calls and voicemail become pretty important. I don't know why it's like 2003 talking to a voice machine to get my voicemail on Android. And it's so slow. It's like,
you have 2 new messages. First message.
and then it gets to the message.
Press 2 to save message. Press 7 to delete.
Now, I don't know who invented this on iPhone. They deserve the most praise. It's the most underrated feature on the iPhone, but it's the voicemail section on the call app. You get a transcript of your message. It usually picks up the name and the phone number and the details that they're talking about, and you can immediately call back, and it keeps the entire history of your voicemail. I mean, what are we doing on Android, guys? Voice machines in 2023? Why? If people are going to ask me why I carry an iPhone, it's not because of iMessage. It's not because of AirDrop. It's voicemail. I can't be the only one who agrees with this. All in all, I can make a 3-hour video detailing every single aspect of the differences I discovered between both devices and which one I preferred. But let's be honest, with the way society is going, cramming as much content it can within a 1-minute vertical video, this is the best I can do, and I tried to highlight the most important parts that people care about. I actually wanted to make this video about a month ago, and at the time I wanted to switch my SIM card back into the iPhone as soon as I got back to the States, but I just decided to keep my SIM card in the Ultra, and eventually I just lost the feeling of wanting to go back to iPhone. When comparing the two in specific categories, you are basically splitting hairs because in terms of a function as a phone, they both do the same thing. They just have a different design on top. And when you pair the phones in their respective ecosystems, they evolve into something more. They become the central hub of how you interact with things on the internet and in your daily life. And if I'm gonna be honest, if I wasn't so heavily invested in the Apple ecosystem and most of my friends and family were on iPhone, I could probably flip a coin and pick either one of these. These two flagship devices are amazing and you can't go wrong with both. 14 Pro, credit where credit is due, would be in this spot here, but 13 Pro is good enough for me. I don't got money like that. But people need to realize that Apple has some really good employees that make great products. But Samsung has really good employees that make great products that occasionally explode. Ding, ding. The fact that I did this for 2 months is a testament for how much I didn't really care about what phone I was using and how much I actually loved being on the Ultra. And that's why I'm not going back to the iPhone, but I'm not sticking with the Ultra either. I'm moving on to the Pixel 7 Pro. I'm serious about this one because Android fanboys keep telling me about how amazing the Pixel series is and how great the stock Android experience is. So I'm gonna give it a go. But if the Pixel 7 Pro wasn't in the picture, I'd pick iPhone just because of voicemails. I'm serious. It's not that the Ultra is worse, it's just I prefer iPhone, and that's all I want you guys to get out of this video. It's all preference at the end of the day. The first couple of weeks is more of just adjusting and getting used to where everything is, but after that, you just get used to it, just like most things in life. So if you enjoyed this video and want a deeper dive on how I adjusted and what I did during the weeks when I switched over to Samsung, let me know down in the comments below. And if you switched from iPhone to Android or Android to iPhone, let me know your experience down in the comments below. Maybe it's the same, maybe it's different. Shout out to the sponsor for making this video possible, Nobody. I appreciate every single sub, like, and comment, and as always guys, much love. For the people that actually watched the video, that noise that happened, oh dude, I'm so sad. My 4K monitor dropped and it cracked. So LG, if you're watching, a sponsor would be nice, please, or Samsung.